Hello everybody out there. This morning I woke up early and did a little bit of reading, and I thought I would share with you today some of the things that I read, which were pretty interesting. And so I haven't had a chance to really go over it too much today, been real busy, but I read the articles this morning, and so we're just going to go through a couple of articles and talk about some science. First of all, I'm going to remind everybody that I am a chiropractor, spine specialist. I adjust people's spines. I've been doing it for 28 years. I love taking care of people. I love teaching people how important it is to take care of their spine. There's a lot of reasons you should take care of your spine. First of all, when you take care of your spine stays young. In other words, not a lot of arthritis in a good spine that gets regular adjustments. And as the spine is adjusting normally, then that helps the nervous system to function normally. That means your brain and your body can communicate. When the body's telling the brain what's going on, the brain can tell the body what it needs to do much better, and everything works better, all your systems. We've even talked this year about how important it is to get adjustments so that your immune system can function properly. When your immune system is functioning properly, you fight off disease like you should. You build antibodies appropriately, and many things happen. I think my wife thinks that it's too dark in here. Am I right? All right, she's going to put a little more light on the subject. So, take care of your spine. That takes care of your immune system, and in a time like this, that's pretty important to have a good immune system. Lots of things in the news with regard to COVID, of course. So, the first article that I read this morning was about mask wearing. Now, there was a study done in Denmark this year with COVID. So one of the things that people have said is that there's no research. You can't say things about, well, with coronavirus masks. Let me rephrase that. The flack that I've gotten because I've quoted studies about flu. Yeah, that's better. Thanks. I've quoted studies about flu and mask wearing, and how there's a lot of research that says wearing a mask does not prevent the spread of the flu virus. And so I've quoted those studies to people, and they've told me, well, that's about the flu. This is the coronavirus, and it's completely different. And scientists have been saying all these other studies are irrelevant because COVID-19 is different. Well, it's not different as far as spread. And we had the 2003 coronavirus called SARS, and we had the 2012 coronavirus called MERS, and they learned then, and they know now that masks don't really help. Well, now here's a study out of Denmark that pretty much says that masks do not stop the spread, that there was no difference between the control groups. And this Denmark study has gotten a lot of flack because the people that are pushing masks don't want the game to end, and this is a game changer of a study. When you talk about the gold standard for medical research, is called the double-blind study, and it is the standard that they always say, well, unless there's a double-blind study, of course, this is a double-blind study. So what they did was they took 30,000 people and told them, wear a mask every time you go out of your house. And they took another 30,000 people and they said, never wear a mask. Okay? And they followed these people for a month. And they did antibody studies on all of them before and after. So it wasn't just the PCR test that's been highly suspicious as far as it working. They did antibody testing. Okay? So, was there a difference in the groups? Statistically insignificant number. So the people that wore masks every day versus the people that did not wear a mask, about the same number of them tested positive for COVID. All right. It was 0.5% in the mask group and 0.6% in the other group. All right, not much difference. So here's a double-blind study, and they wore a surgical mask that was approved by the World Health Organization, and so I'm sorry, I said 30,000. It was 3,000. I fudged. 3,000 individuals assigned to wear a surgical face mask, and 3,000 were unmasked. 80% of them completed the study, did what they were asked to do. Okay, so among the mask wearers, 42 participants ended up testing positive. 1.8% compared to 2.1% among the controls. Okay, so they called that statistically insignificant, and you can say, yeah, it was slightly better in the mask wearers, but not enough to say masks slow the spread. Just in my observations, the more that they clamp down and force masks, the more cases there are. So explain that. Let's see if there's anything else we need to cover on that one. It's pretty interesting. It does say that they tried to not let this get published. The powers that be that want to keep everybody freaked out about the coronavirus and want to keep selling masks. But it ended up getting published. And the government tyrants are doubling down on masks, mask mandates, in spite of the research. No matter how strict mask laws are enforced, nor the level of mask compliance the population follows, cases all fall and rise around the same time. Makes no difference. Mask mandates have no impact on infectious trends. All right, so there you have it. There's nothing to fear but fear itself is how they end up. All right, so there you have it. So people constantly ask me why I don't wear a mask. It's because I read. All right, now this one is called, this one is from Joseph Mercola. Many of you are familiar with Mercola. Dr. Joseph Mercola is a doctor of osteopathy. Was in practice for many, many years. Now he has the largest alternative healthcare website in the world. He has many enemies with the big pharma and the medical paradigm because he speaks the truth and he backs it up with research. I like Dr. Joseph Mercola. I get his newsletter. And this is what popped up this morning as I read it. It says the COVID-19 vaccines may cause massive side effects. And so it was interesting. I read through this article. There was quite a bit of interesting information. So it says early in November, Pfizer sent the stock market soaring when it announced that their vaccine was more than 90% effective. Then 1 week later, Moderna boasted a 94.5% effective rating. How did they get to those numbers? That's a very good question. It goes on to say that odds ratios can be very misleading how they play with numbers. And so they had, this was a large, they had, they gave the shot to, let's see, let me see here. All right. So he talks about how they can kind of play with numbers on this thing, how they came to the 90% and the 94.5%, and that really is just kind of playing with numbers. So Pfizer's numbers, how they came to 90% is they're just playing with numbers. But this scientist, Dr. Alan Cunningham, says, and he's a retired pediatrician in New York that's done a lot of research on this, and he says when they say 90% effectiveness, okay, so they had specific data is not given, but is easily enough to approximate the numbers involved. Based on the 94 cases in a trial that has enrolled about 40,000 subjects, so 8 cases in a vaccine group of 20,000 and 86 cases in a placebo group of 20,000, okay? So there was a COVID attack rate of 0.0004 in the vaccine group and 0.0043 in the placebo group. So the relative risk is 0.093. Okay, guess where they got their number from. Okay, they're playing with numbers here. Sounds impressive, but the absolute risk reduction for an individual is only about 4%. Okay, so I'm sorry, about 0.4%. So the absolute risk ratio between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated is 0.4%. So here's what you need to ask yourself is, are you going to get this experimental vaccine for a 0.4% decreased risk of getting coronavirus that is 99% everybody recovers from? So, and then you have no idea what all the side effects are going to be because it's an experimental vaccine. You're going to be the test subject. You're going to be the guinea pig. So is that worth it to you for 0.4%? And so the number that this pediatrician, Dr. Alan Cunningham, said the important number is the number of how many people need to be vaccinated in order to protect one person. So they always saying that all the healthy people need to be vaccinated to protect the people that are immune suppressed, that can't be vaccinated. So it's up to us to protect them. Okay, so we take the risk for them. So the number needed to vaccinate, NNTV, number needed to vaccinate, is 256, which means that to prevent one COVID-19 case, 256 individuals must get vaccinated. The other 255 individuals derive no benefit, but are subject to vaccine adverse reactions. All right? So major questions still remain. So let's look at so that was the number. So Pfizer's number was 256. The estimated number for the Moderna vaccine was 167. So 167 people need to be vaccinated to prevent one case of corona. 99% not lethal. Okay? So what we have here is a questionable vaccine preventing us from a non-deadly disease. And of course, people are always going to debate that coronavirus is deadly. Coronavirus is highly contagious. Coronavirus is not deadly if you treat it correctly. Now, in people that are 75, 80 years old, anything can be deadly. But you can't say that coronavirus is deadly to the entire population of healthy people. So, so what do we really need to know about this vaccine? So the COVID-19 mortality is extremely low outside of nursing homes. So 99.7% of people recover from COVID-19. 99.7% recover. Why do we need a vaccine for a 99.7 recovery rate? That's a very good question. An experimental vaccine, all right? If you're 60 years of age, your chance of dying from seasonal influenza is greater than your chance of dying from COVID-19. Referenced. That number is referenced from a scientific journal. All right? Data clearly shows that COVID-19 has not resulted in excess mortality. So when you look at the overall mortality, it is not greater than other years on average. This is true even among the elderly, as evidenced in a Johns Hopkins University article published just before Thanksgiving of this year. According to the article, the deaths of older people stayed the same before and after COVID-19. Since COVID-19 mainly affects the elderly, experts expected an increase in the percentage of deaths of older people, older age groups. However, this increase is not seen from the CDC data. In fact, the percentage of deaths among all age groups remains relatively the same. This is from Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Hospital. As soon as the article started trending on Twitter, Johns Hopkins delayed it, saying it was being used to support false and dangerous inaccuracies about the impact of the pandemic. Oops, we're not supposed to tell the truth, they said. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 studies suggest immunity against SARS-CoV-2 infection is more widespread than suspected, thanks to cross-reactivity with other coronaviruses that cause the common cold. If you had a common cold last year, you created antibodies and you have an easier time with the coronavirus this year, COVID-19. All right? Asymptomatic people are highly unlikely to spread SARS-CoV-2. A study looking at the PCR test data from nearly 10 million residents in Wuhan City found that not a single one of those who had been in close contact with an asymptomatic individual, someone that had tested positive but was asymptomatic, had been infected with the virus. In all instances, virus cultures from people who tested positive but had no symptoms also came up negative for the live virus. Okay, this is research. This is research, not myth. All right. Will the COVID-19 vaccine save lives? Okay, according to Peter Doshi, associate editor of the British Medical Journal, also questioned the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, pointing out that the current trials are not designed to tell us whether the vaccines will actually save lives. They didn't design the studies correctly. Okay. All right. So, Dr. Doshi says, what will it mean exactly when a vaccine is declared effective? To the public, it seems fairly obvious. The primary goal of COVID-19 vaccine is to keep people from getting very sick and dying, a national public radio broadcast said bluntly. Yet the current phase 3 trials are not actually set up to prove either. They don't prove that they're saving people from getting sick or saving people from dying. None of the trials currently underway are designed to detect a reduction in any serious outcomes such as hospital admissions, use of intensive care, or deaths. Nor are the vaccines being studied to determine whether they can interrupt transmission of the virus. Everybody is going to line up for this vaccine. I wouldn't if I was you. Okay, let's see. They're talking more about the vaccine poses distribution challenges. So the test isn't designed to tell whether it's going to keep you from dying. It's not designed to tell you whether it's going to keep you from getting seriously ill. And now, distribution issues. All right? Listen to this. The vaccine has to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius, okay? 94 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. All right. Moderna, that was Pfizer's. Moderna's can be kept a little bit warmer, 20 degrees Celsius or 4 below zero. Okay. Both pose a problem to providers who will be administering the shots. Okay. So in other words, if the vaccines, they're going to send them out, they have to be sent out wrapped in dry ice. They have to be kept frozen, like more frozen than your standard freezers can do. The vaccines are so fragile. They're made with messenger RNA. We'll talk more about that. Messenger RNA, which turn your own cells into factories that produce SARS-CoV-2 protein that in turn trigger antibody production. All right? So it's a experimental vaccine using RNA. Now DNA is what we're made of, right? RNA is pieces of that. They're going to mess with your DNA. Okay? So the problem is that messenger RNA is easily broken down, so it needs to be kept at freezing temperatures to stay stable. So Pfizer said its special packaging keeps the vaccine frozen with the help of dry ice. Even so, providers will still have to abide by strict guidelines, one of which says the freezer compartment storing the vaccines cannot be opened more than twice a day. And when opened, must be closed within 1 minute. Once thawed, the vaccine can be kept refrigerated for 5 days. Okay? The whole situation makes distribution a huge challenge. And also, the smallest amount you can order is 975 doses. That means the vaccine most likely will have to go to places capable of administering large numbers of vaccines in a short period of time to avoid spoilage. Okay? What's going to happen if people get shots that have gone bad because they didn't get kept frozen properly? You're the guinea pig. Okay? Now, does everybody understand as well that these vaccines, the vaccine manufacturers, have no liability? Did you know that? No liability. So if you get damaged by a vaccine, they don't have to pay any damages. That's a problem. When you're on an airplane and the pilot's flying, the thing I like about that is the pilot. I just saw a test come by, or a question come through from Ashley, and I will answer that, Ashley. That's a good question. The pilot goes down with the plane. And so I like that because the pilot's going to try to land that plane pretty safely. But if you're on an airplane and you see the pilot jump out with a parachute, okay, basically these vaccine manufacturers, they have no liability. So since they're going to be doing a huge test on millions of people, their test is a human study, not animal studies. It's a human study. And I'm not going to line up for that one. All right. They talked about the 2009 flu pandemic, the swine flu pandemic, and how it turned out to be a total fraud. 2009, 2010, and it caused all kinds of problems in children getting the shot. They got narcolepsy, big problems. No liability, no big deal. All right, we won't talk about that. But Ashley just brought up the fact that a lady that was a former employee of Merck, that she developed vaccines for Merck, and she left the company and became a whistleblower. And she went around, traveling around, speaking quite a bit. I had actually watched via YouTube a couple of her speeches talking about the shenanigans that Merck pulls in their vaccine department. She was one of the people in the vaccine department, and the whistleblower. We just learned today that she's been mysterious death, and that's pretty upsetting. But so in this article, they talked about many of the hoaxes that the vaccine people have pulled. So there was the 2005 bird flu epidemic that killed, they said, predicted it would kill 2 million, okay? 98 people globally died, okay? That one turned out not so well. There was a New York Times bestseller book about that, The Great Bird Flu Hoax. In 2006 and 2007, again in 2008, hyped warnings over the bird flu were repeated, exposing it as little more than a cruel hoax. In 2009, there was a swine flu hoax, a vaccine campaign, for which, as mentioned, turned into a disaster. The summer of 2012 was again filled with dire predictions of bird flu. Nothing was not a global killer. Now the COVID-19 pandemic differs from the previous ones, however, in that it's being used not just to enrich drug companies and justify the existence of gain-of-function research, but also to usher in a reset of the entire global economy. So the author here believes that there's other stuff behind this, not necessarily about a pandemic. All right. So this article talks about lots and lots and lots of issues with this with this vaccine. No accountability for vaccine harms, as noted by Barbara Lowe Fisher, co-founder of the National Vaccine Information Center, based on this fact. Here we go. No one involved will be held accountable or face any repercussions. Just as GlaxoSmithKline was not held accountable for the narcolepsy cases caused by their pandemics for the swine flu, instead, they will all continue to profit while an unsuspecting public will beta test yet another potentially dangerous vaccine. Even if side effects are rare, when you're talking about vaccinating 7 billion people, even a tiny percentage will translate into millions of people affected. I've been studying the topic or the issues in vaccines for 30 years. I started when I was a new dad. My son was born on Christmas Day of '88, and he reacted to some vaccines. I had no idea. I just trusted the doctors, and boy, was I misled. I began studying. I had a good classmate that tipped me off to say, hey, you got to do your homework. You can't just assume your kids' lives are at stake. So I've been studying it for a long time, and I've come to the conclusions that vaccines are not safe and effective. This new vaccine coming out is experimental at best. They have not designed the studies properly. I think it's going to be a disaster. I highly recommend that you think twice. Even a lot of healthcare providers are saying they don't want to get this vaccine. It can potentially mess with your DNA, change the human genome. Not a good idea. There's rumors that there's other things in the vaccine that are going to be problematic. So please get your adjustments, take care of your spine, boost your immune system, vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin A, If you do get COVID, we have a good treatment for it that Dr. Brownstein in Ohio has perfected, and he even did a study on that to show that it was effective. He has lost not one single patient all year. So please do your research. Please think twice. Tell your loved ones. Thanks for tuning in tonight. God bless.